Hey everyone, welcome to Danny Chats. This is episode number 18, and today I'm joined by Thomas. We're going to be talking about liver transplants and again the Transplant Games, which has been a bit of a theme over the last few weeks. Hi Thomas, how are you?
Hello, Danny. I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. A bit
Good.
sore, a bit achy. I had my first sessions yesterday, so I'm also getting ready for the Transplant Games. So, yeah, what is your experience of them so far?
Um, I've had two. I got my transplant in July of 17, and the first games that I was able to do were the U.S. Transplant Games in August of 18, and that was in Salt Lake City in Utah.
Yeah,
So that was a year. Let's see, July, August. That was a year and a month after my transplant,
it's
and
quite soon.
yeah, it was pretty soon. They require 9 months
Yeah,
to be considered for the games. So I made it, and I got approval from my transplant team. Everybody was on board, and so we flew out to Salt Lake City. My wife has family there anyway, so it was a good excuse for a trip.
yeah,
And I was competing that year in the what they call a virtual triathlon. A traditional triathlon has the run and the swim and the bike all one back to back, but these were separated by distance and time. So it's considered virtual. But I enjoyed it a lot. I had a good time. Met a lot of really interesting stories there.
yeah.
Um,
That's a
they,
lot to train for, the triathlon in that short period after your transplant. It's just over 2 years now, and I only just sort of feel ready enough physically and mentally to take that on.
yeah. But I did. Everybody knows about the rehabilitation after a big surgery,
Yeah,
but I got my diagnosis and was starting my transplant journey in March of 2015.
yeah.
And my wife and I had already been runners for quite some time, active
Wow.
runners. But we both know from working in healthcare that the more healthy that you can go into your transplant or any big surgery, that you should do better post-operatively.
Yeah,
So I started to increase my activity in March of 15, and I started adding on more distance running. And then when I just couldn't feel comfortable running any farther, I decided to try triathlon. So I started that in probably November of 15 and
yeah,
started training. I call that my prehabilitation phase of my transplant. Um, and I got my new liver in July of 17. So I had just a little over 2 years to train for my surgery. And I
yeah,
worked hard.
yeah.
I worked real hard. So it was a natural thing for me to want to get back into training as soon as I could after surgery and just worked real hard at it.
Yeah, that is definitely great advice. Is the fitter you can be before your any operation, it makes such a big difference to the
Yeah,
recovery.
yeah. The We had a meet and greet with my transplant surgeon uh, before I got my exception points for my cancers. And I told him at that point, that I'd been training, and he could see that I was in pretty good health, aside from my liver cancer, minor detail. And he was just gave me free rein after surgery, pretty much. He said just I could do what I wanted as far as I just kind of was prudent and didn't overstress.
Yeah, yeah.
So he
So
gave me a
you
lot of free rein.
that's really good. So you just mentioned there you had cancer. So that was obviously the reason that led to the transplant.
Yes, I had a kind of a double jeopardy thing. Back in the 1980s, late 1980s, I contracted hepatitis C, and therapy for that wasn't very good,
Yeah,
and it wasn't real complete. And for a variety of other reasons, I kind of fell through some cracks and didn't really find out that I still had live virus until 2005 or thereabouts. And my new doctor in 2005, no, I'm sorry, that's not, yeah, in 2005. And he got me on therapy right away. And we just knocked all the virus out. I finished the course of therapy and stayed pretty healthy.
what does the therapy involve?
At that time, it was alpha interferon injections and ribavirin.
Okay, is that
And
like chemo then, or is it?
it's probably not as drastic on the body as chemo.
Yeah,
There is body aches and pains and some nausea and, just kind of a lackluster feeling, blah kind of feeling that goes along with it. But it didn't have the terrible side effects of bleeding and nausea and all the horrible things you hear about with most chemotherapies. And but we got through that just fine. And that was in about 2005 and 6. He put me on once a year, every year, ultrasounds of my abdomen. And in March of 2015, we found the first little somethings in there. He did had them do a biopsy early, way back in around 2006 or so, just to see. And I had significant liver damage, cirrhosis type damage. And so, like I say, he followed me yearly. And 10 years after that, roughly, that's when the cancer came in. It's kind of a normal procession, I guess. You get the hepatitis C, damages the liver. The liver gets sclerotic and diseased, and then over time that turns into cancers. And then, so he told me at that time I had one choice, and that was a transplant.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lady that I spoke to from Colombia a couple of weeks ago, she thought she had a cancerous tumour in her liver, and they wouldn't do a liver transplant. But then they subsequently found out that it wasn't cancerous, and then she could have a transplant. So I wonder why that would be. The fact that you could have that and she couldn't, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's different protocols in different countries. Someplace, I'm not real sure. The way it was told to me is that with the sclerosis in the liver and with the cancerous tumors, that in the States, that was pretty much a lock-in on getting a transplant.
Yeah.
So.
And you say you worked in healthcare. Had you sort of met anyone that had transplants before? Was there something that you'd had any experience in? Obviously not yourself, but
yeah, true. Quite a few years ago, again back into the middle 90s, early 1990s, I had worked in an intensive care, and the closest I ever got to anything transplant is the hospital I was in had a patient who was going to be a donor in the intensive care. So I had met the team and was there when they took this patient down to have his organs recovered. But I'd never had any experience. I'd never taken care of anybody with a transplant, and didn't really know anybody that had, and it wasn't the kind of thing that was in all the nursing literature. It was just sort of in a corner almost all by itself, it seemed.
Yeah.
So that was pretty new.
So it's sort of a shocking and worrying time as such.
It's really a kind of a crazy thing. When I got the diagnosis and I came home and told my wife about it, it was almost like nonchalant for both of us. It was like, well, okay, let's deal with it.
Yeah.
And when I go back through the diary that I was keeping through my transplant journey, there's a lot of notations that I would make that, this should be scarier.
Yeah.
Why is this not scarier than it is to us? We had kind of determined that we were going to beat it. And I don't know. Yeah. There's some periods when I said, oh, okay, this is getting real. But then another couple of pages later, it's like, yeah, okay.
I can relate. I mean, I'd had a lot of experience with hospitals anyway. So the whole hospital thing wasn't a shock to me. So it wasn't, like the people that have never had any experience of hospital and then they get ill all of a sudden and then they're having to deal with their first time in hospital and all of this. So I was kind of a little bit prepared. And like you, there wasn't really anything I was particularly scared about or worried. But your wife, I bet your wife definitely was, because I know, my family, they were, and not that you have any control, but they have less control than you even so. So, they're just really worried for you.
Yes, she did well. She's a pretty strong woman for sure. Yeah. And she did very well. And together we just determined that this was something we could take care of.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with the help of the transplant team.
Of course, yeah. And after your transplant, I mean, I remember I was trying to I was staying at somebody's house, but I'd planned to move out, and I was trying to move out before my transplant, which I'm really pleased I didn't, because afterwards I didn't realize. I mean, the hospital said that you were going to need support, but in my head I was like, I'll be fine. But them first few months, you really need support. Do you not think?
I do, but I can't say that I had a very easy time of it, because nobody has an easy time of this.
Yeah.
But I did have a relatively easy time.
Yeah.
And while she was, she took some time off of work, took a couple of months off of work. And by the time that we were out, I don't know, a month and a half or so, she started to go back to work.
Yeah.
Because I didn't need that around the clock attention. We actually got in trouble with one of our social workers early on because, like I said, we were both runners before surgery.
Yeah.
And I was doing real well at home. And so it was like, I encouraged her to go out and get a little run in here and there, a couple of miles here and there, an hour, half an hour, whatever. And we slipped up and told one of our social workers about it. And she gave us so much trouble about that.
That's important, though, isn't it? For somebody that is caring for anybody, it's important that they still have their time, I suppose.
Absolutely. The caregivers have to take care of themselves, or they can't be good caregivers.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that.
So
yeah, so then you did the Transplant Games in America, and then you flew over to England.
I did, yes.
To Newcastle.
We had a great time. We had a really good time. The first race, I did triathlon in Salt Lake City, but I didn't want to transport a bike to England with the expense and the hassle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I just did track and field, and we got into town. The first race was on the first Saturday of the Transplant Games. It was a 5K, and we ran that. And it was funny. We went to look at the course the day before, and it was a beautiful park, nice paved pathways, and cows. They apparently use that area as seasonal grazing for some of the local farmers, and I thought that would be very interesting, having to run through the cows.
Just don't wear red.
Cleared. It sure was. But all the animals had been removed for the day of the race. And
so how many days is the event over?
They're spread out over about a week, I think.
Oh, really?
Thinking we had our first race was on opening day. That was on a Saturday. We had left the following Friday, and there were games still being played on Fridays, but I think there was maybe something else on Saturday. So I don't know, say 7, 8, 9 days maybe.
That's really good. And is it sort of really social after the day's finished? Do people get together and hang out?
They do somewhat. We travel together for sure, and we like to be tourists, so we didn't stay around too much. We took a train and went up to Edinburgh for a few days, and
oh wow,
took a day trip out to from Newcastle to Tynemouth, a little town out on the mouth of the River Tyne, and so we did a lot of that. But there are a lot of events, a lot of social events organized at the Transplant Games that, if you wish, you can certainly take part of them. Yeah. We were busy being tourists.
Yeah, because the next one is in Australia, isn't it, in 2023?
Yes.
All plans going ahead, that is.
Yeah. By then, this whole lockdown and COVID thing should be much better under control, and we're very hopeful that it goes through.
Yeah, same. I'm in training. I'm ready for it. I'm getting ready for it.
I'll see you there.
Yeah, and like you say, it's a great excuse to do some traveling, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. It really is. We like it a lot, and all the competitors at the World Games are from just everywhere. We met some quite big contingents from India and Iraq, and of course, being in Newcastle, Great Britain's team was huge.
Yeah.
And the Americans, U.S. people from all over the country were there, and just the whole world is represented. It's just amazing.
I mean, I was a little bit shocked at, the physical peak that some of the people that train. I mean, you run a marathon last weekend. It's like, it's very inspiring to see from somebody that's had a transplant. Now it's inspired me to go out and get that fit myself, because you don't
Yes.
really know what your limits are, and the hospital can be very not restrictive, but they can worry you, and it's so to see all these people that have trained and how fit they can really get, it's so inspiring.
Yes, there are some really amazing athletes, but you know what I enjoyed as much as the people that were really fit and good athletes is the people that were not what you think of as being athletes.
Yeah.
The slow and the maybe a little awkward, or they just don't fit the stereotype of an athlete, but they're out there and they're representing the gift of a new life.
Yeah.
Even though when it comes to the winning and losing of it, the first across the finish line, that's not really their goal. Their goal is to be there and to enjoy absolutely rejoice in their whole new life. And it's great to see them every bit as much as it is the good athletes.
Yeah, it's a massive celebration, isn't it? It's brilliant.
Yes, it is.
Do you know, in terms of track and field events, so what's the sort of rundown? Because I've tried looking, it just says track and field on the website at the moment. So I'm interested in, say, like 100 meters maybe, and then what else is there? Do they do long jump or anything like that as well?
They do shot put, high jump.
Oh, high jump, that would be.
Long jump. I don't know if they do the hammer, or the U.S. games had javelin. I don't know if they do that at the World. I don't recall. And the track day, they do the 100, 200, 400s, 800s, 1500s. But I don't remember seeing any hurdles. So
Yeah,
I don't
it's probably
think
a bit too dangerous.
Well, it sure would be for me.
Yeah. I wouldn't fancy tripping over one, to be fair. Funny.
Yeah.
So, and your wife, obviously, she competes as well, not in the Transplant Games, but in, when do you compete in marathons, or is it just social?
It's a little of each. We do compete somewhat within our age groups.
Yeah.
But, there's an awful lot of good athletes out there. What we have found over the 15, 16 years that we've lived in this community is an awful lot of the people that we really enjoy spending time with are also part of the running community or the athletic community.
Yeah.
And it's a great community for us. A lot of support, an awful lot of support. And once the word started getting out of my transplant, because, we didn't really advertise it a whole lot, but once the word started getting out, the amount of support I had from other runners that we've known for a few years, was just so gratifying.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then how do they do that in the Transplant Games with age? Because I've been told that they have like the kids racing, but what do they do for elder people? Is it just all mixed? Do they grade people on standards? Is it, just all chucked in?
Yeah, they usually do what they call age groups. And
Yeah.
I think the Transplant Games had 10-year age groups.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure. It could have been
That
5 years. I think
that
it might
kind
have
of
been
makes
10.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
The 20s,
So,
30s,
your
40s.
20 to 30-year-olds compete against other 20 to 30-year-olds, and your 60s and 70-year-olds compete amongst their own, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Because I didn't want to bring up your age, but when you told me the other week and you said you'd just been out for a marathon, I was like, well, that's impressive, Not
Thank you.
that age is a big number, but I mean, do you mind saying how old you are? Because you don't look as old as what.
Yeah. I'm 71 now. I'll be 72 come April.
Yeah, so I mean, it's brilliant to see, because I know you haven't had your transplant since you were young, but one of my questions was, how is it going to be in 5-10 years time?
Mm-hmm.
And to see people see someone like yourself who's still going really, really strong is so inspiring.
It feels good. And it feels good to be an inspiration. I hear that from time to time, and I'm really pleased that I can play that role.
Yeah. I mean, was that on your mind at all when you had a transplant? How long is this going to last? Is it something that I'm going to have again in 5 years, or?
I don't think we ever thought about that. I think the one thought that was recurrent to me was, what is my lifestyle going to be afterwards?
Yeah.
You know, Deborah, my wife, and I, we had already established a lifestyle of traveling to go to do foot races. And then once I started into triathlons, we would travel to do our triathlons and that sort of thing. And I was more concerned about not being able to get back to that kind of a lifestyle than I was, you know, the idea of dying on the table never really entered our minds, either one of us. But what I did worry about was coming out of surgery and being unable to be active.
Yeah.
So I took a very, very aggressive stance in my rehabilitation, like I did my prehabilitation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you find some of that, a lot of that for me, recovery was sort of two parts. There was the physical side, which I found after, 6 months to a year, I was pretty much back to normal. But it's only recently that I've really come to terms with the mental side of it all as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just, the fact that there's a donor involved and there's a donor's family involved. So things like Christmas, when they come round, there's that extra thought in your head of, this, although you're celebrating, there's a family out there that might not be and stuff like that. Have
Right.
you reached out to your donor, or
I
is that
did, and
something?
I really struggled for a couple of years that, I need to write this letter. I need to write this letter. And the thought that kept creeping into the back of my mind is, these people have given up a loved one and they've grieved and hopefully had closure. And I kept thinking, I don't want to reopen that wound.
Yeah.
So I didn't write that letter, and I kept thinking, I've got to write that letter, but then I don't want to. And I spent, oh gosh, Danny, 2.5 years
Yeah.
going back and forth on that. And
I'm 2 years down, and I've sat down to try and write it, but I find it very emotionally hard.
Mhm.
And just thinking what to write. And I interviewed someone last week, and he unfortunately he lost his daughter, and he donated her organs, and he said, so he understood it from a donor's side as well as becoming, having an organ. He understood what it was like to give out organs as such,
Mhm.
and he said just a letter saying thank you is enough. He said that's all anyone
Yeah.
really wants.
I had met two people that really helped me change my mind. I was racing what they call a half iron distance triathlon, which is a little over 70 miles in total.
Yeah.
And the run part was 3 laps around a 4-mile course. And I have a racing singlet that says Donate Life on the front with the Donate Life logo. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if they're in the UK, but in the States, they're like the major organization that represents and advocates for transplant. So I was wearing a jersey with their logo on it, and I passed a water station, and some lady just hollered out, "Yay, Donate Life," and waved and woohooed and all that kind of stuff. So I stopped to talk to her, and she had lost a son a few years earlier. She didn't say from what,
Mm.
but so we chatted for a minute, and then I took off. And second lap around, she was still at the water station, so I stopped and we chatted and all that kind of stuff. And third lap around, I came to the water station again, and she was still there. So I spent a little bit more time, and she said, in our conversation, that she thought that the donor families would really, really do well to hear that their loved one loss was not in vain, that something good came from it.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, we hugged and we cried and did all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I met another woman sometime later that her brother, gosh, I don't know, I think she'd said maybe 10 or 20 years earlier, her brother had been hit and killed by a drunk driver, but they were able to donate. And I think she said 4 recipients got his organs, and that her mom and dad would have really been able to have better closure if they knew. But apparently they had never heard about from their recipients. So I kind of took those ladies' advice to heart and finally did sit down and penned a letter. Hardest thing I've ever done. Well, one of the hardest things I've ever done is penning that letter.
It's the hardest, one of the most emotional things I've ever tried to do.
It's tough.
Just well up inside and just like, oh.
Oh, I know. I don't know if it happened to you, but about my fourth day after surgery, the first day was in ICU. The second day was transferring to, well, actually, the second day was still in ICU. The third day was transferred and starting to walk and move around more. And about the fourth or maybe the fifth day, the fog was lifting just enough for me to realize that my loved ones, my family, we were all like happy. We
Yeah.
were celebrating this amazing event, but somebody across town is going to a funeral.
Yeah.
And I had 2 really bad days just trying to come to grips with that. It was so hard.
Yeah.
And I'll be 4 years out in July of this year. And it's nothing that is constantly in my mind, but I do under, certain triggers will come up and I'll think about them and, get just a touch of melancholy.
Yeah. I totally relate to that. I can understand that. And I think about four days in after my surgery, I put like Verve album on, which I hadn't listened to about for years, and I just cried for the day. Like it was such a mix of emotions. It was happy, it was relief, it was sadness, it was literally everything. Because I didn't really cry. I didn't cry before or anything. I cried 2 times. That was the first, and the second time I cried was the nutritionist came round a few days later, and she told me I couldn't eat what was it, certain cheeses and cured meats. Well, I was sat eating a pack of cured meat that was wrapped around this sort of cheese, soft cheese, and she said I was already halfway through a pack of it, and so I kind of just pushed it away from me, and I just cried, and it was like my world had ended, and she was like, "Oh, I'll come back tomorrow," and yeah, just it was just all the emotions I think, and that was the final sort of push.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many up and downs, especially in the early days. I find that they don't come around very often. I will say before we first spoke about doing this, I went back and pulled out my diary from my transplant days and started to read through it, and some of that kind of starts to come back up when I see the early days of the adventure and just the transcendence from one end to the other. And then the post-operative phase also is just very emotional.
Yeah.
And in a lot of respects, I hope that never goes away.
Yeah.
I want to be reminded of how lucky and how fortunate I've been and how thankful I need to be.
Well, we have a massive reminder on us, don't we, really?
Well,
Big scar,
we do.
yeah. Well, I had a shower the other day, not the first time ever, but I had a shower and I was sort of just cleaning myself and I looked down like this and I caught a glimpse of the side bit and I double took a look at my scar. I totally sort of forgot it was there and it was like, oh, it's a reminder. Definitely a reminder.
It is. I spend a fair bit of time outdoors. I'm fairly well tanned, and I heal well. I don't get a lot of scar,
Yeah.
and when I look at mine, it's faded greatly. I mean, it's still obvious and it's still there.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
some places a little deeper than others, but yeah, it's a reminder too.
Yeah, mine's healed very, very well as well. I mean, I drank so much water. That's all I remember doing was drinking liters and liters of water after my operation.
Mhm.
But for a good few months as well, just constantly just seemed to couldn't get enough water.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember drinking a lot of water so much, but I do remember worrying about my weight. It
Yeah.
seemed like I couldn't get my weight up, and um, from about the third or fourth day after surgery, I started working out. I started doing laps around the hospital unit and climbing stairs and irritating some of the staff because I was disappearing to go take a walk around the lake and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But when I got out and started to train in earnest, I was just burning so many calories healing
Yeah.
and burning a lot of calories trying to get my activity level back up that I was just dropping weight. I
Yeah.
was eating and eating and eating and eating, and I was still dropping weight. I finally had to start doing calorie counts and doing
Well, they
protein
put
rate
did
and that sort
they
of thing.
were you on steroids?
I was initially, but I was very fortunate. I got off of I think the prednisone was the only
Yeah.
steroid that I took, and I didn't stay on that for long. I would say maybe a monthish,
Yeah,
and they
same.
got
I
me.
think I was on it.
Yeah, so I didn't get all the puffiness that goes along with this and weight gain that goes along with that.
I had night terrors from it, really bad. I had an experience. I'd spoke to someone before, and they told me about having night terrors, and they told me that it was like someone was pinning them down in the bed, and I couldn't really relate, and I couldn't understand it. And then when I had one, or I had a few myself, it is terrifying. It was like a goblin had climbed up onto the side, and you can vividly see it, and then it pins you down. It just sits on your chest, and you just can't move. When I Googled it, like the pictures that people have drawn and stuff are so very similar to what I saw. It's really, really weird. Yeah. But luckily that was the only side effect I had. And I wasn't on it too long.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I didn't have any of those that I can recall. I'm real happy about that.
Yeah. I think if I had sleep paralysis as a child, I probably would never have slept again. But because you're an adult, you know it's just a dream. So you're all right.
Yeah, I've heard of those, but unfortunately I've never experienced it.
No. So, when's the next games in America? Like we say, the World Games is in 2023. We've got a UK Games coming up, hopefully this summer. How about you guys?
We had scheduled games in the States August of this year, July or August of this year, 18. And that's not true. Hang on. 20. I'm sorry. August of 20 we had games, but those were postponed when the COVID came through.
Yeah.
And they pushed them back to summer of 2021. But there's still a lot of concern here, so they're making most of the activities more virtual.
Yeah.
And they're not going to have the gathering, and it was scheduled to be in New Jersey, up near New York City. But so that's just going to be virtual now, what they can do. The next games that are on the schedule will be in 22 in San Diego in California.
Oh, nice.
So we'll plan on going to that too if we can.
Yeah. Have you been to California before?
Not very much. I did some convention duties for one of my jobs many years ago, but that was mostly time at the convention hall, not much touristy time.
Yeah.
My wife and I, back in around the year of 2000, I think, we flew out to San Diego to do a marathon there and spent a few days. Her daughter came down from the state of Utah, and we visited and spent a few days there. But that's the only time I've been to California.
Yeah.
So
I lived there when I was a child, but it was such a short time, and I think I was about 3 years old, so I don't really remember any of it. There's just the odd random picture I've seen of me out there. Yeah, I mean, I want to come over to America at some point. It's so big that I think I'm going to need to be there for a few months just to get around and see everywhere.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. We have an Airbnb room in our house that we share, and we've had so many people from Europe that will spend a whole week just trying to go around Florida and stop off here to either visit the Space Center or go to take a cruise out of our local port and that kind of thing. But they'll fly into the far south end of the state, make a big circle around it, and take a week to do it.
Yeah.
And still really only get the bottom half of the state.
Yeah, I bet. So big.
Yeah. Well, when we went to Newcastle for the games, we were there for a weekish, and we spent a couple of days up in Edinburgh and then a day out to the ocean. And we wanted to do so much more that we keep talking that, well, we need to go back and spend another week and maybe go to the south, or maybe go to Wales, or maybe go to someplace. It's a beautiful country. We enjoyed it.
Yeah. If you ever come back again, obviously let me know, and I'll come and meet you somewhere. It'd be lovely to meet up.
Will do.
I live just outside London, but I mean, England's fairly small, so there's coast, an hour, 2 hours drive from me as well, so it's not so bad, really.
Yeah.
It's nice. We just don't have the hot weather. That's the only problem.
Oh yeah. We the games, of course, were in the summer, and we went to Edinburgh and were tourists there for a few days, and went to the that great tattoo that they have there.
Yeah.
And we had been warned that we needed extra jackets and sweaters and such for that, and we were so happy to have extra jackets. That was extremely cold, and we were high up, so of course the wind was blowing through the stadium, and that cold wind and all that. It was
icy.
Yeah. Yes.
Icy. It'd be completely different in Australia.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah, that's going to be a wonderful trip.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
From
It
our
really-
point of view, having gone through the transplant and all that, all of our trips are wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm every single day that I wake up, I've got a little balcony, and I just go and step outside every morning, and I'm just so happy.
Yeah.
You know, just blessed.
Yeah. You had a bit of snow, I think, just here this last week or so. Right?
Yeah. We had a small bit of snow. It never stays around long here though. I think where I live, we've probably got the least as well from everywhere in the UK.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, we get a few inches. It's fun while it lasts, then it turns to slush. It'd be nice to have like 2 foot of snow over Christmas, and then
Right.
then done with it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't get snow of any sort where we are. We're just not too far above the tropics, And
Yeah.
I think the last snow that we had in this area would have been in 1978 or thereabouts.
Yeah. So you're obviously winter now, or coming out of winter to spring nearly. But what's the temperature there where you are then?
At the race this morning, it was 72 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah. We were in -4 the other morning when I went out in my car. Yeah, -4. It's freezing.
Yeah. I'm okay here.
Yeah. You stick to your t-shirts and short weather. It's lovely, and flip-flops.
Yes, we have to put on socks with our sandals. We know it's getting cold.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out to talk to me, Thomas.
You're sure welcome, Danny. Thanks for the reach out. I take any opportunity I can to share the story because I just think the more people that hear the more stories, the more likely it is that they'll become donors themselves, or at least sign up for the donor.
Donors. And I mean, I've had people reach out to me that have had friends that are going, or have been put on a transplant list, and their friends have flat out been like, I'm not doing it. I don't want to do it. But because the same as you, they've got that fear of what life's going to be like afterwards. So I think these podcasts are great as well, just to show that life can be amazing afterwards. There is a lot of life to be had.
There sure is.
Yeah.
There sure is. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
I sure appreciate the reach out, and the opportunity. So thank you as well.
That's no problem. No problem. Well, I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, Danny. Thank
I'll
you.
say see you later. Bye bye.
All right. Bye-bye now.